in the morning by someone going to the bathroom. So, yeah, we heard some noise. Well, apparently some campers heard a bit of noise between the hours of 12 and 2. So we're thinking that's the likely timing of the event.
Gee, I wonder if the person was staying with you. Well, let us know if you solve it, Jesse. And what an interesting thing to happen to you as the owner of a camping ground. That's highly unusual.
Well, the camping ground's been in the family for over 40 years, and it's definitely the most remarkable event we've had here.
Hope you have a lovely Christmas too.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Are you full up? Are you full up for Christmas itself?
We're expecting it to be pretty busy, especially with this event. So, it's, every year that the coast in this area in particular seems to be getting a bit more attention by travellers. So, we look forward to having a good busy summer.
Happens every night at the Gentle Annie Seaside Campground.
Yeah. Maybe we should put that on our website.
Nice to talk with you and all the best. That's Jesse and Paley Atkins on the panel. What to talk about in the last few minutes remaining. Guardian columnist Benjamin Lee gets Kevin Hart fired from his Oscar hosting role, the gig that Kevin Hart said will be the climax and highlight of his career. He's coming here soon, Kevin Hart. Benjamin Lee, who's also copping quite a bit of stick, unearthed historic tweets from Hart along the lines of, "I love gay people, but..." For example, "Yo, if my son comes home and tries to play with my daughter's dollhouse, I'm going to break it over his head and say, stop, that's gay." Should you be fired for 8-year-old tweets? He's apologised, of course. Or were some of the tweets and attitudes so hurtful that you kind of deserve to lose the hosting role? What was your thinking about this one?
My first thinking was that Kevin Hart's not funny anyway, so good, get someone who is. But I don't think you should be fired for 8-year-old tweets. But if you read what Benjamin Lee went into, there's a very strong line of homophobic behaviour from him. It's not just... He didn't just push a like button accidentally 8 years ago, No,
that is true. He's being defended, though, through the unearthing of old tweets from female comedians using homophobic terms too.
Yeah, I think there's a difference because those tweets from Sarah Silverman and Chelsea Handler, used a singular homophobic slur. And I think if he had some random joke in his stand-up comedy that was, a bit off colour, that'd be one thing. But it seems like it's an ongoing train of thought for him as if I could stop my son from being gay, if he was going to be gay and I could stop that, I would. It's not really part of a stand-up routine, is it? That's obviously what he thinks, and there's been ongoing, so there is very much a thread there.
A couple of dubious films as well.
And it's exactly, and he's turned down roles because he turned down gay roles, he's accepted roles that, and so, look, it's up to the Oscars whether they choose to fire him or not, and this is part of the thing about the transparent world in which we live these days, and the whole digital, leaving your footprints everywhere.
I found it interesting what one prominent agent said. "We don't encourage our clients to host the Oscars anymore. Every host gets picked apart by vultures. The job's become a lose-lose for everyone. Hollywood's finally figured it out. Big stars have lots to lose. New ones don't get ratings." Whoa. It's a tough old world in Hollywood, isn't it? Anyway, maybe that's why cell phone use is apparently strictly banned during Kevin Hart's upcoming performance in Auckland.
Very possibly.
A lot of Christmas comments. I'm sorry I haven't been able to incorporate any. They weren't all against you, by the way.
Read one that wasn't, Jim. Just one.
No, don't.
Hang on, I'm just scrolling.
Next time.
Still scrolling.
Off
just
we go.
looking.
Goodbye.
Still looking for you, Damien. No, I've seen some coming and supporting you.
I'm sure I saw some somewhere. Wait, there was one.
Damien, we're being cruel. Damien Christie, Alexia Russell on the panel. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And checkpoints on the way.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. You're listening to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. You can watch us live on Facebook at rnz.co.nz/checkpoint, on Freeview Channel 50 and on Face TV Channel 83. On tonight's program, the man accused of murdering backpacker Grace Millane makes his first court appearance. The Prime Minister publicly apologises to Grace's parents, saying their daughter should have been safe here, and New Zealanders are hurt and ashamed by what's happened. Why hasn't KiwiBuild boss Stephen Barclay been at work for weeks? We ask Housing Minister Phil Twyford for a straight answer. And the boss of Transport New Zealand, Fergus Gammy, is gone too as the dodgy warrant saga rolls on.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The Prime Minister has made an emotional apology to the family of the 22-year-old British backpacker Grace Millane. The 26-year-old man charged with her murder appeared in the Auckland District Court this morning. Jacinda Ardern says she cannot imagine the grief that her family will be going through. She says from New Zealanders she's spoken to, there's an overwhelming sense of shame that this has happened here.
A place that prides itself on our hospitality, on our manaakitanga, especially to those who are visiting our shores. And so, on behalf of New Zealand, I want to apologise to Grace's family. Your daughter should have been safe here, and she wasn't, and I'm sorry for that.
Jacinda Ardern. Some international media have identified the man accused of murdering Grace Millane. A photograph was included in the online articles before they were taken down. A fire at a government research and development agency in Lower Hutt has been put out. Fire and Emergency says crews are still on site at Callaghan Innovation, damping down hotspots. At its height, 9 fire engines battled the blaze, which started in the roof of the building about 2:15 this afternoon. It then spread into other parts of the building. Staff have been evacuated for the rest of the day and no injuries have been reported. Firefighters are working with staff and public health officials to contain any hazardous material. RNZ understands the head of KiwiBuild, Stephen Barclay, is away from work due to an employment dispute. Mystery has surrounded Mr Barclay's absence following reports he's been out of the office since early November. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says she can't comment as it's an operational matter, but says she's been assured the absence has nothing to do with the KiwiBuild policy or its implementation. The National MP, Judith Collins, says the public deserves answers.
If there is a genuine issue, let us know what it is. But to say that Mr Barclay is away from the office and someone else is handling calls with no details, is he on holiday, what's happening, I actually think the government is making the whole thing worse, and there's nothing like a mystery to keep something going.
The National MP, Judith Collins. The government is to reduce the ACC work levy paid by employers and self-employed people, but other levies will remain at the same rate. The work levy will drop from 72 cents per $100 of liable earnings to 67 cents. The ACC Vehicle Risk Rating Program, which applies different levy rates to different makes and models of cars based on their safety ratings, will also end. The ACC Minister Ian Lees-Galloway says the program is challenging for ACC to administer and lacks evidence that it's contributing to a safer vehicle fleet. He says it also loads more of the burden onto low-income people and families, as they are generally less able to buy cars with the best safety ratings. The new work and earners levies will come into effect on April the 1st next year, and the vehicle rating risk rating will no longer apply from July the 1st. The French President Emmanuel Macron is set to meet trade unions and other employers' organisations in a bid to diffuse weeks of unrest in Paris and other cities. The meeting comes ahead of a TV address in which he's expected to announce measures in response. France has seen 4 weekends of violent protests against fuel tax rises, living costs and other issues. A mother is urging families who are struggling to put aside their pride and seek help from the Auckland City Mission before Christmas. Hundreds of people lined up outside Eden Park in Auckland today to collect food and Christmas gifts from the mission. This year is distributing its emergency parcels from 3 different sites, while its central city premises is being rebuilt. Stacey, a solo mother of 8 children, heard about the Christmas drive on Facebook. She's struggling to make ends meet after giving up her job in Kaikohe to look after her sick teenage child who's in Starship Children's Hospital.
It's not me that's missing out, it's my baby, so I had to suck it up and sort of, come and ask for help, and, this is the help that I've received, so it's a blessing that you put down that pride and you do it.
Stacey, a solo mother who was given food and Christmas gifts from the City Mission today. And just to hand, the Transport Agency's chief executive has resigned. Fergus Gammy announced his resignation today after months of mounting pressure over the agency's failure to enforce road safety regulations. He says in a statement he's proud of what he's achieved since he took the top job in March 2016. However, he says the agency is changing its approach to be tougher on compliance. The board has accepted his resignation, which takes effect at the end of the month. It's 5:05. To sport, the impact of Shaun Johnson's sudden departure from the Warriors has so far gone largely unnoticed by the players. It's 2 weeks since Johnson's shock departure from the Auckland Rugby League club, when he gained an early release for his contract and then signed on with Cronulla. The Warriors captain Roger Tuivasa-Sheck spoke publicly for the first time about Johnson's departure and says his Kiwis teammate wasn't usually one of the earlier players to join pre-season training.
It's funny you should mention because he doesn't really start till after Christmas, so yeah, it's pretty normal at the moment. So, you know, once that all finished up with the news of Shaun going, I think the boys were quick to move on from that and just ready to dive into what's next for us.
Warriors captain Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. Despite playing a leading hand and helping New Zealand to their first away series win over Pakistan in nearly 50 years, off-spinner Will Somerville has been dropped for the two-test series against Sri Lanka. 34-year-old Somerville made his test debut in the third and deciding test against Pakistan in Abu Dhabi last week and took 7 wickets to help the Black Caps to a 123-run test victory and a 2-1 series win. However, Azaz Patel, who also made his test debut in the Pakistan series, is the only spinner who's been named in the squad for the 2 tests against Sri Lanka, the first of which is in Wellington starting on Saturday. Meanwhile, Australia a short time ago was 229 for 8, needing 323 to beat India in the first test in Adelaide. That's the news.
Child poverty numbers unchanged.
We could fill Eden Park twice over with the number of kids who are doing it really tough.
Frustration with Ngāpuhi leaders.
Frankly, I'd tell some of them to go and see a taxidermist.
And the greatest Bond villain of all.
Flying helicopters, gunfight, even deactivating nuclear weapons. They're all best done when very sober.
For your ears only. Morning Report with Diane Espiner and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, respiratory specialist Dr Stuart Jones warns too many previously non-smoking young people are taking up vaping. And after 10, BBC Women's Hour broadcaster Dame Jenny Murray celebrates history's women. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, cloudy periods, isolated showers tomorrow. Waikato to Manawatu, including Bay of Plenty, the Central High Country and Gisborne through to Hawke's Bay. Today, mostly fine with isolated showers. Tomorrow, cloudy periods with showers, some heavy with possible thunderstorms from afternoon. Horowhenua to Wellington and Wairarapa, cloudy periods and isolated showers, mainly about the ranges. Marlborough and Nelson, mostly fine about the coast. Cloudy periods and a few showers inland, some heavy with possible thunderstorms during the afternoons. Bulla to Fiordland, cloud increasing and occasional rain developing this evening. Canterbury and coastal Otago, mostly cloudy, scattered light rain or drizzle. Southland and for the remainder of Otago, cloudy periods and isolated showers. Showers becoming widespread for a time tomorrow afternoon and evening. And the Chatham Islands cloudy with a few showers clearing this afternoon, fine breaks increasing tomorrow. It's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. And I'm Lisa Owen. Struggling to maintain her composure, the Prime Minister has described the overwhelming sense of hurt and shame that the country feels over the killing of British backpacker Grace Millane. Our reporter Annika Smith was at court for the appearance of the man accused of her murder. Shortly we'll bring you her report, including the message from the judge to Grace Millane's family. But first, here's what Jacinda Ardern had to say about it a short time ago at her post-cabinet press conference.
I cannot imagine the grief of her family and what they will be experiencing and feeling right now. And my thoughts and prayers are with her father, David, who is in the country, her mother, Gillian, who cannot be here, and her wider family, friends and loved ones. You know, from the Kiwis I have spoken to, there is this overwhelming sense of hurt and shame that this has happened in our country, a place that prides itself on our hospitality, on our manaakitanga, especially to those who are visiting our shores. And so, on behalf of New Zealand, I want to apologise to Grace's family. Your daughter should have been safe here, and she wasn't, and I'm sorry for that. I've advised the family through the police that if there is anything we can do to assist, we are here to help with that.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern there. The 26-year-old accused of murdering Grace Millane appeared for the first time in the Auckland District Court today. Judge Evangelos Thomas told Ms Millane's family that their grief must be desperate. The accused lost his bid for interim name suppression but will keep his name secret while his lawyer appeals the decision. Meanwhile, vigils are being organised throughout the country in memory of Grace and in support of her family. Annika Smith was at court today and filed this report.
Clad in a blue boiler suit, the man entered the dock where he would stand silent and still for the next hour. The public gallery was packed to capacity, and at one point a man sitting at the back of the room yelled "scumbag." The 26-year-old is accused of murdering Grace Millane between the 1st and 2nd of December. Miss Millane, who disappeared on the eve of her 22nd birthday, was last seen entering City Life Hotel in Auckland's CBD with the man 9 days ago. Police found her body in bush in the Waitakere Ranges yesterday afternoon. It's since been removed and a post-mortem examination is taking place today. News of the discovery sent shockwaves throughout the country, and since then messages of despair and solidarity have flooded social media. At court this morning, Judge Evangelos Thomas addressed her family. Media were not initially allowed to record in court, but the judge told the family he didn't know what to say to them at this time, before saying their grief must be desperate. He said he hoped justice would be swift and fair and bring them peace, but warned them that would not happen today. Nicole Skew's Pool is among a group trying to organise a candlelit vigil for Miss Millane. She says any woman could have been in her shoes.
I think the overwhelming feeling from a lot of women that I've talked to is that we all could have been Grace. Many of us have been solo travellers in our early 20s. Any of us could have been having a night out in Auckland.
Miss Millane left the UK 6 weeks ago to travel the world after finishing university. On her Instagram, you'll find John Lennon's words, "Imagine all the people living for today." Another vigil organiser, Michelle Oakes, says they're organising a vigil in solidarity with Miss Millane's family.
It's more a message for Grace's family, just to say that as a New Zealand public, you know, we're very sorry for what's happened to them and their daughter, and it's certainly not something that we tolerate or even expect to happen in our own backyard.
But Miss Skew's Paul says it's not just about Miss Millane.
There's sort of a gut reaction to go, this isn't us, this isn't New Zealand, how awful. And to some degree that's true. We don't often have women tourists get murdered in New Zealand, but we do have women get murdered in New Zealand, most often in their home. And it is an epidemic. It's possible to hold the grief for Grace and the grief for all of those women.
Miss Millane's case continues to draw international media attention.
How and why Grace Millane died will be the focus of an intense investigation that New Zealand police say is far from over. A body found in a forest in the Waitakere Ranges, a beauty spot with hiking trails a short drive from Auckland, is thought to be that of the university graduate from Essex.
Some international outlets have identified the accused online, including a photograph, before taking the articles down. People throughout the country are expressing their support for Miss Millane's family. At a West Auckland roundabout, a white sheet with the words "Rest in Peace, Grace" was hung between two statues. Bunches of flowers lay underneath the sign as it flapped in the wind. A vigil for Miss Millane is being held in Queenstown this evening, and more are planned in the coming weeks. For Checkpoint, Annika Smith.
Secrecy continues to shroud the absence of KiwiBuild head Stephen Barclay, with questions over why he is not at work. The public service boss has reportedly been away from the office since November. RNZ understands it relates to an employment dispute. Here's our political reporter Craig McCulloch.
Stephen Barclay was announced the head of KiwiBuild in May. The Housing Minister Phil Twyford tweeted, "Great to have someone of Stephen's calibre leading the KiwiBuild team." 5 months later, Mr Barclay's not in the office, and no one will say why.
I can't comment on anything to do with an individual public servant. That would be completely inappropriate.
Phil Twyford appeared on TVNZ's Q&A programme last night. but shed little light on the situation.
So I don't hire the public servants, I don't manage them, I just get their advice.
Do you know why he's left the job? Is it?
No, and I haven't been advised on that, and it would be really inappropriate for me to...
You don't know why the CEO of KiwiBuild has not been in the job since November.
I know that he's not at work, but it's literally not my job to know.
The Ministry of Housing and Urban Development says Mr Barclay is away from the office but has not resigned, and says while he's away, a senior leader at the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment is providing support. RNZ understands the absence is due to an employment dispute. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern won't comment, but does say she's been assured it has nothing to do with the KiwiBuild policy or its implementation.
The way that it's best characterised is that it is an operational matter, and therefore, unfortunately, I'm going to be very boring on this. There's not much more than I can say on it.
The opposition says that's not good enough.
I'm just flabbergasted by it, and I'm saying to Phil Twyford, as the Minister, step up, tell us what's going on.
The National MP, Judith Collins, says the secrecy just makes matters worse.
This is the government's big flagship policy. A lot of fanfare around Mr Barclay being appointed 5 months ago. Now he seems to have disappeared and no one's supposed to know why.
The government's KiwiBuild policy aims to build 100,000 homes over a decade. The latest confusion comes after sustained criticism from the opposition over a lack of demand for some properties and the house's expensive price tags. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
The French President Emmanuel Macron is set to break his silence tomorrow after a fourth weekend of anti-government protests. More than 1,200 people were arrested over the weekend as yellow vest protesters threw stones, torched cars and vandalised shops around the country. The protest, which was initially sparked by a planned fuel tax, they have continued despite a government U-turn on the issue. The ABC's Bindi Bryce reports.
High-visibility yellow vests have become the symbol for the Paris riots and those who want President Emmanuel Macron to stand down. And for the fourth week in a row, they've created chaos in the streets of Paris. It's left to shopkeepers such as Gregory Carré to clean up the mess.
You can understand the yellow vest movement, but this is completely unacceptable. Look around you. Everything is broken, damaged. All of the shops have had to close and pay money to shut everything up. And it happens every week. Everyone is losing business, and it is so violent that at the end of the day, nobody understands what's going on, what they want, what they don't want. There is no organisation, and all of the businesses in the area have to pay for the broken pots. It's dreadful what is happening. We have to look out.
Police have arrested more than 1,200 people, and Paris prosecutor Magistrate Remy Hart says there is a pattern.
The profiles of the people who were arrested look a lot like the profiles of those we have observed last week. The majority are men aged under 40, most of whom have no criminal record and who come from various French regions, from east to west. Among them are more notable elements who come from the far right and the far left.
The latest round of demonstrations has left dozens injured. Authorities in France have signalled their intention to crack down on the violence.
My office is fully committed to not let the atrocities committed in Paris during these days of movement go unpunished. We cannot promote the idea or think that it is possible to come and break everything and to commit seriously violent acts without thinking of what the justice system will do.
Paris's landmarks such as the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre remain shut, and focus has shifted to the impact the riots are having on France's economy. The President Emmanuel Macron has praised the French police for their efforts, but has so far kept a low profile during the protests that have plunged his presidency into crisis.
Bindi Bryce with that report. Urgent talks between Air New Zealand and unions are underway in a bid to avert a one-day strike that one travel agency says would be almost unprecedented. The strike by the airline's engineers on Friday, 21st of December, would affect nearly 42,000 people, some of whom are now scrambling to make backup plans. Jessie Chang reports.
It's now a waiting game for nearly 42,000 Air New Zealand passengers as they watch to see how mediation talks play out. The airline has said that the average income of the staff prepared to go on strike is $115,000, but the Aviation and Marine Engineers Association says a lot of that salary is based on overtime. Spokesperson Stan Rennick says engineers work more than 55 hours a week, and fatigue is a big concern. But unions aren't the only ones concerned. The strike at the busiest time of year is a headache for travel agents like Brent Thomas from House of Travel.
This will be a major impact, not just on Air New Zealand, because people have connecting flights internationally on other airlines, and we're going to have to work through each one of those on an individual basis. So, yeah, it's a very, very large and sort of almost unprecedented in terms of the numbers who may be impacted.
And airline customers have already been in touch.
We've certainly been fielding some calls from those customers, but at the moment it's definitely a wait and see with what comes out of today's meeting, and hopefully they can get resolution. But if not, as days go by, customers will be becoming more and more anxious about what is going to happen.
Andy Bank booked flights months ago to fly from Auckland to Wellington with his partner on the day of the planned strike. They're planning to meet up with family there and then travel to a batch in Nelson. He's not looking forward to the alternative of driving down.
I know during the holiday season it's probably going to be pretty jam-packed, especially if the flights are disrupted. So I can't imagine what those roads are going to look like.
Andy Banks says he's had no communication from Air New Zealand about the strike. He says he's had to find everything out from the media.
It's definitely frustrating to just feel like you're out of the loop, and like you might have to, kind of constantly be checking back in on things, and they're not going to kind of, have your back and proactively tell you what's going on.
And he says this isn't the first time he's had to deal with a black hole of information from Air New Zealand.
The flights we had booked, they ended up changing the route and canceling the flights to the certain city in Japan that we were going to fly into. And same deal there. There's no notification whatsoever, and I actually just had to find out through friends that were going on the trip with me that the flight was disrupted, and still to this day never received an email or anything from them.
Another Air New Zealand customer, Perrine Gilkison, booked flights for a friend's wedding in Auckland on the 22nd of December. But she has some sympathy for the engineers.
I don't think that a strike would be called on the busiest travel day of the year unless there were some serious issues that hadn't been dealt with. So for me, I'm just going to kind of play it by ear. I think probably there'll still be a way to get up by bus or something.
Stan Rennick says Air New Zealand is offering 2 pay rises of 2% each, but the union wants at least 3%. The union negotiating team from Etu says they are committed to bargaining into the night if needed, and would-be travellers are hoping that bargaining will see the engineers and the airline reach an agreement that would put their holiday plans back on track. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Jesse Chang tēnei.
And Air New Zealand declined to comment on the talks today. It's been widely reported that an audio recording captured the gruesome moment when the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi was killed in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in early October. CNN has spoken to a source who says he has seen a transcript and says it clearly points to the involvement of a member of the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's inner circle. Nick Robertson has the story, which contains some disturbing details that may be upsetting for some of our audience.
Jamal Khashoggi's last words. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. These previously undisclosed details of what happened that afternoon in October come from a source who's been briefed on the investigation. The source has read a full transcript of an audio recording of Khashoggi's horrific final moments. Within moments of his fateful steps into the consulate, Khashoggi recognises someone, asks why they are there. The answer, you are coming back. According to CNN's source, the Turkish transcript identifies that person as Mahir Abdulaziz Mutreb, a former Saudi diplomat and intelligence official working for Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, whom Khashoggi knew. Khashoggi is clearly alarmed and replies, "You can't do that. People are waiting outside for me." According to the source, the conversation ends right there. The transcript indicates noises as people set upon Khashoggi, and very quickly Khashoggi can be heard saying, "I can't breathe." He repeats it again, "I can't breathe." CNN's source says it's clear from his reading of the transcript Khashoggi's murder was no botched rendition attempt, but the execution of a premeditated plan to murder the journalist. But it is what happens next that is really horrific. The transcript records many voices and noises, then says scream from Jamal, again scream, then gasping. Noises are identified as saw and cutting. Then a voice Turkish authorities identify as Dr. Saleh Mohammed Al-Tubaiki, the head of forensic medicine at Saudi Arabia's Interior Ministry. He says, if you don't like the noise, put your earphones in or listen to music like me. According to the source, Matreb, the apparent leader of the team, makes at least 3 phone calls during the murder to a number Turkish officials identify as being in the Saudi royal court. Matreb tells the person in Riyadh, tell yours, that the source takes to mean your boss or your senior. The thing is done. It's done.
Nick Robertson with that report. An animal rights group is calling for a man to be charged after he was filmed seemingly force-feeding a kitten cannabis and joking about it. In the video that was posted to social media, the man says the kitten is new, but it's the second time it's got stoned. He then forcibly blows smoke into the kitten's face. Co-founder of Poor Justice, Craig Dunn, says he's identified the man and woman in the video and passed that information on to police in Taranaki. Now, if you're watching, here's a warning. You may find some of the images disturbing.
What you're actually doing to an animal is you have total control of it and you're getting wasted and I think it's quite acceptable to get a kitten stoned and then laugh about it and you've got, by the looks of it, you've got children that are there as well in the room by listening to the dialogue and the conversations, and it's just not acceptable. And then to go post stuff on your Facebook and say you're going to kill it. Now, his quote that he's put on his Facebook page with him giving a finger and his little message about, I'll read it to you because it is quite disturbing on what he says. He basically goes, only women seem to make an issue out of nothing, laughing my ass off. Don't care for other people's opinions, keep it to yourself. Off the bop the kitten on the head, one less pest, LOL. And he's got a picture of there giving the finger.
What do you make of that?
Well, it's absolutely disgusting. The guy's a complete psychopath. And to have that, and this is why I contacted the police this morning. We posted it up on our social media last night. I think there's over 100,000 views on it. Just under 100 people have contacted me with the same name, his contact details. The girl that's also involved with her work emailed me this morning and said she no longer works for us. She left about a year ago, and they were concerned by the video as well. So it just shows out there the public don't want to tolerate this. And, and we have an ideology that's being pushed at the moment by council and government that cats are pests. And so this kind of behaviour seems to be okay because people think it's a pest, but it's not.
So, Craig, did you put a shout out there to get the identities of the people in the video?
Yeah, we had the video, so we released it on social media and said, look, does anyone know who this is? We believe this is the area. And people came straight back to us.
And what have you done with that information now?
So I contacted the Taranaki police this morning and laid a complaint there and gave them all that information and asked for them to be charged under willful ill treatment of an animal, which carries a 5-year jail sentence or a $100,000 fine. It's a serious issue, and people like this actually go on to do other harsh crimes. With rape, murder, they all lead from torturing animals. So I want to see the police press charges against the person straight away.
Some people will say that's a pretty big leap, Craig, to say you go from mistreating a kitten to what you were saying are incredibly serious, life-threatening crimes.
Absolutely. And then you look at let's look at Tafe Hone, who went on to kill Kylie Jones. Now, he started killing animals at 13 and 14 years old. And you look at Jeffrey Dahmer, Bundy, all the serial killers that we know of all started torturing animals at a young age. And these are the pretexts to have a look at. It's a big red flag. The FBI have been investigating people since 1978, putting people on watch lists that torture animals because they know they go on to serious crimes that affect us in society.
So basically we need to take it seriously. Do you think the police have taken your complaint seriously?
Oh, look, absolutely. The last one that we had reported was a young girl down in Invercargill who was, they were stoning a kitten to death, and they're all giggling and laughing about it. Police took that seriously. I gave them the information in the morning. They had warrants in the afternoon and put those kids into the juvenile system for doing those crimes. It's a real serious issue. People might overlook and go, oh, it's just nothing, it's just an animal. But what it leads into society is really serious.
Craig, you mentioned the fact that this message is being put out there that cats are pests. Do you actually think that this is a contributor, the perception of cats is?
I think Gareth Morgan's ideology have pushed people to go, yeah, look, I don't like cats either. And since we're coming up with councils and pushing that agenda around that they are pests, and this thing that they're killing wildlife and not looking at anything else around it, just going cats are the easy target, then yeah, it has created people that people don't like it. I see it on social media all the time. I've been to all the meetings, I go to these things and hear what the public has to say. And there are a lot of people that don't like cats and we don't have a tolerance for them. But they are part of our community, they are a sentient being, and people love their cats. We're one of the biggest loving cat nations in the world.
Well, the police told Checkpoint that they've handed the complaint to the SPCA. The SPCA says its inspectorate team has been working on it over the weekend, but for legal reasons at this stage it is unable to make any more comment. And coming up, in the wake of a report showing 1 in 5 families are struggling to feed their kids healthy food, we're in Otara finding out just how hard it is to do the family shop. And the mysterious substance plaguing a Waitara street. We could have the answer. We'd love your feedback. Don't forget you can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us, Checkpoint, or good old-fashioned email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. But first, here's Katrina Batten with the headlines.
The Prime Minister has made an emotional apology to the family of the 22-year-old British backpacker Grace Millane. Jacinda Ardern says New Zealanders she has spoken to have shared an overwhelming sense of shame that this happened here. A 26-year-old man charged with her murder appeared in the Auckland District Court this morning. Some international media defied a court ruling and identified him. A photograph was included in online articles before being taken down. People are being told to stay back from Callaghan Innovation in Lower Hutt because there may be dangerous gases from a fire. Crews are still damping down hot spots and they are working to contain any hazardous material. The Transport Agency's chief executive has resigned. Fergus Gammy's decision comes after months of mounting pressure over the agency's failure to enforce road safety rules and vehicle testings. RNZ understands the head of KiwiBuild, Stephen Barclay, is away from work due to an employment dispute. Mystery is surrounding Mr Barclay's absence. The Prime Minister says she's been assured it has nothing to do with the KiwiBuild policy or its implementation. The Auditor-General John Ryan has again called out schools for spending tens of thousands of dollars of government funding on overseas travel. He says some schools do not understand their financial responsibilities and some are not budgeting for building maintenance. More than 60 schools broke education rules and laws last year, many of them for borrowing money without Education Ministry approval. Others loaned money to staff and paid teachers outside the education payroll. The ACC Vehicle Risk Rating Program, which applies different rates to different makes and models based on their safety ratings, is to end. The ACC Minister says the program is challenging to administer and lacks evidence that it's contributing to a safer vehicle fleet. He says it also loads more of the burden onto low-income people and families as they're generally less able to buy cars with the best safety ratings. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 o'clock.
Thanks, Katrina. Time to get down to business now with Madison Reedy. Hi, Madison.
Hi, Lisa.
A Kiwi tech company. This is being sold in part or totally to Japanese?
This is a Christchurch-based technology company called Tate Foundation, and it makes radio technology, the kind of official ones that you can see police using in 80s movies where they say over those types of radios, not typically the ones that people are listening to us on right now. This was established by the business stalwart Sir Angus Tate back in 1969. So the the company's been going for a while. Today it announced that it sold a minor 40% stake in one of its two international businesses to a Japanese competitor. This company is called JVC Kenwood. Now, it's a competitor because it makes the same type of radios. It also makes navigation systems and car entertainment for in-car systems. And Tate says that it sold this minor stake to create a type of partnership with a competitor to help it create and research and develop new technologies, which they say in turn will give it a competitive edge globally. They didn't say how much they sold it for, but we do know that this company has been trying to raise about $30 to $40 million to help its expansion, and they say that this has pretty much covered that.
Interesting. And liquidators of Korbel Construction, this is another of the construction companies that have run into trouble. They have released further information about the company's position. What does it reveal?
The liquidators' first report came out today. So this company, Korbel Construction, the Christchurch-based construction firm, which then expanded into Auckland a number of years ago, it fell into liquidation exactly a week ago on Monday last week. Now, this first report opened up its books, essentially, and said that it owes $5.9 million. Now, majority of that is owed to trades workers and subcontractors. The small part, which is about $1.34 million, that's owed to a few creditors. They're secured. Their claims have been confirmed. That's BNZ Bank, two family trusts, staff, and inland revenue.
So all the subbies, they're unsecured creditors, are they?
Subbies are unsecured. So this liquidators report said that the secured creditors, the bank and the family trusts, are likely to be paid back in full. That there's enough money in its main bank account to do that. But when it comes to these trades workers and subbies, there isn't enough to pay them. And whether or not they will get paid any cent and any dollar that they are owed is basically hanging by a thread on confirming the invoices of the work that Korbel actually did in November while it was collapsing. So the liquidators are trying to reconciliate that work and, I guess, decipher whether or not these subbies will be paid back. Also, when we talk about the liquidation of construction firms, this is one of many that have happened this year. Ebert Construction was the most recent before Korbel. And one thing that was interesting about Ebert and has happened again here is that when it comes to this new law called the Construction Contracts Act, these construction firms, since this new law came into effect in April last year, they're supposed to keep retention money for subcontractors aside.
And for normal people who don't understand that word, it's kind of like squirreling away a ring-fenced amount of money if you get in trouble.
Which these companies have fallen into financial trouble.
The people you owe.
And the issue that we've seen in both Ebert and again here in Korbel out of this report is that both of those accounts were short. So Korbel's one is about $117,000 short. Their retention fund, which as you said is ring-fenced, supposed to be safe, it is always a separate bank account to the company's main bank account, so it can't be accessed. This one is short. Subbies are owed about $227,000. There's only $110,000 in it.
Not good news. Okay, what about the rest of the markets? What have we been seeing?
The NZX Top 50 index fell today. Not as bad as the rest of the world's markets are looking, though. So we did come off rather lightly. We were down about 1.2%, so that's 107 points down to close at 8,660 points tonight. The New Zealand dollar is buying at 68.9 US cents, 95.5 to the Australian, which is pretty high, and 54 British pence.
Fantastic. Thanks, Madison. Madison Reedy there with your business update. And 1 in 5 Kiwi kids don't have access to good, healthy food. That's a major contributing factor to the country's child poverty rates, according to the latest Child Poverty Monitor report, which has been released today. Now, the measure of childhood deprivation also found that children in the most disadvantaged communities were twice as likely to end up in hospital as those living in areas of economic and social advantage. Nita Blake-Person with this report.
It's just gone midday at the main shopping area in the Auckland suburb of Otara, and while the fruit and veggie store has a few customers, the nearby butcher's has some bulk specials. It's the local takeaway shop that's the busiest.
Yeah, around here it's all about fast food, I'd say.
Lisa says while some groceries are cheap here, fast food is cheaper still.
Bakery food. Yeah, definitely everything from the bakery is the cheapest.
Access to enough good, healthy food has been highlighted as a major issue for Kiwi kids. The 2018 Child Poverty Monitor reports found between 161 and 188,000 children are living in households with moderate to severe food insecurity. Around 10% of low-income households go without fresh fruit and vegetables a lot of the time, and 18% receive help from food banks. I bumped into Siu and her young daughter popping to the dairy in East Tamaki. She says it can be expensive covering food costs at her place.
Well, there's 7 of us at our house, and we all have to pay for our bills, and then what we have left is what we use for our groceries and stuff. Yeah.
Expensive?
Yeah, really expensive.
And with petrol costs rising, Siu says that makes things even harder.
Well, everything here is not cheap. Like, everything here is expensive, so yeah, we just have to spend wisely and to actually make it, buy our food and stuff,
17-year-old Ezra was grabbing a loaf of bread for $1.50 from the local Supret. She says while there's a lot of cheap food around in Otara, it's not necessarily healthy.
The most popular food in this area would be probably chicken and chips, yeah. Food around here is cheap, but I wouldn't say that healthy.
But Ben Villy believes it's up to people to make healthy food a priority.
But I believe it's very affordable, but it all depends on what people spend their money on, to be honest with you. Because some people, they really spend their money on alcohol and smokes and things like that. Someone like me that I don't smoke and drink, I will have enough money to look after. I can look after 7 children that I have. So for sure, there's people will, and then there's a lot of fruits and veggies around, and it's cheap enough for us to buy. As long as you spend your money wisely, rather than putting other things before, your health,
Almost 56% of children living in households where the main income source was a support benefit experienced food insecurity. Children living in state housing were twice as likely to have trouble accessing food compared with those in private rentals, and 6 times more likely than kids living in owner-occupied homes. Ben Villy is spending $400 a week on groceries for his family. He says sometimes that means making sacrifices.
It all depends what you spend your money on. The thing is that I sacrifice a lot of things just to make sure that my kids will have food on the table. And I think that's if we have to prioritize our families, then I think there's always a way. With God's help, there's always a way to fund for that.
The Children's Commissioner, Judge Andrew Beecroft, says there are around 100,000 kids doing it tough in New Zealand. Judge Beecroft says the findings from the report show New Zealand has dropped the ball on child poverty, and when compared to previous years, nothing has really changed. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Nita Blakeperson, aho.
Checkpoint requested interviews with the Minister for Child Poverty, that is the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, the Minister for Social Development Carmel Sepuloni, and the Ministry for Social Development. All of them said that they were unavailable. Hundreds of people lined up outside Eden Park in Auckland today, but they weren't clamouring to get their seats for a rugby game. Instead, they were there for food and Christmas gifts being handed out by the City Mission to the needy. This year, the social service provider is distributing its emergency parcels from 3 different sites, while its central city premises are being rebuilt. Eva Corlett filed this report.
In our family food parcels, we've got pretty much perishable food.
That's Kelly Brown, former streetie turned food bank manager for the mission. We are standing in a room at Eden Park, one of the mission's 3 distribution centres for this year's Christmas drive.
Pretty much all our presents for all our kids, ranging from different ages and stuff like that.
So you've got sort of teddy bears and
games or whatever the kids like to play with.
Brown boxes are stacked up either side of us. Volunteers dash in and out with shopping trolleys, creating special parcels for each family as they arrive. Some of those families have been lining up since 2 o'clock this morning. By the time I get there at 8:30, 150 people are waiting. Mr. Brown says the need is great.
We don't know how big it will get, but every year it always gets bigger and bigger and bigger, so just got to go with the flow, I suppose, on how everything goes.
One of those lining up is solo mother of 8, Stacey. She had a job in Kaikohe, but last month her eldest son was admitted to Starship Hospital in Auckland and she lost her job. Stacey saw a post about the Christmas drive on Facebook.
Here I am thinking I had nothing to give my children other than myself and love,
And that's all, you know, I'm full of love at the moment and time. But yeah, it helps, you know. My babies are going to be really happy and I'm so grateful.
And she has a message for other parents.
I've been embarrassed, you know, asking for help for so many years in my life, and I've realised, you know, it's not me that's missing out, it's my baby. So I had to suck it up and sort of, you know, come and ask for help. And you know, this is the help that I've received, so it's a blessing that you put down that pride and you know, do it.
City Missioner Chris Farrelly says it's mostly mothers and grandmothers lining up for help. This year, the mission has had an unprecedented increase in demand for food parcels and will double its Christmas efforts.
We've identified very clearly that we've got a growth in food insecurity and food poverty in New Zealand. It's a serious issue. So we knew that this would be exacerbated over the Christmas period.
Chris Farrelly says having the distribution centres at Eden Park, Papakura Marae and Ngāwhariwatia Marae and Mangere gives people a sense of privacy they didn't have lining up in central Auckland. Eden Park's CEO Nick Sortner is proud to open the stadium gates to the community.
It's sad to think that there are families that are in that position in New Zealand, and I mean, from Eden Park's perspective, we're going to do whatever we can to engage with the community and offer the support that should be available to those families in need.
Hundreds of volunteers will help out over the next 3 weeks. Eden Park ambassador and former All Black Kevin Mealamu was there packing presents and greeting people at the gates.
Everyone down here are volunteers, and so you really appreciate the work that they put into making people's days and making it easier for people that are going through a bit of a tough time at the moment.
The Auckland City Mission is urging people who want to contribute to donate money if they can. Otherwise, presents and non-perishable food items are welcomed. Presents for teenagers, such as sports equipment, stationery and books, are especially needed. I tāmaki makaurau mō te hōtaka o te ahia hinei, ko Eva Colette tēnei.
The chief financial officer of the Chinese communications giant Huawei has argued she should be let out on bail as she waits to be extradited to the US. Meng Wanzhou was arrested on December the 1st in Vancouver at the request of the US. Court documents show she is petitioning to be bailed due to severe hypertension and fears for her health. The 46-year-old is facing accusations that she covered up her company's links to a firm that tried to sell equipment to Iran in breach of US sanctions. She says she's innocent, while China has strongly criticised her detention and is demanding her immediate release. The arrest has spooked global markets amid worries it could torpedo possible thawing of trade tensions between the United States and China. The BBC's James Ransley reports.
China's foreign ministry has summoned the US ambassador in Beijing, demanding details of the detention and insisting that America withdraw Ms. Meng's arrest warrant. The arrest happened as US President Donald Trump and China's leader Xi Jinping attempted to de-escalate a bitter trade war at the G20 summit last week. America's trade representative insists that Ms. Meng's arrest won't have much of an impact on talks.
It is totally separate from anything that I work on or anything that the trade policy people in the administration work on. So for us, it's unrelated. It's criminal justice.
The Huawei executive is accused of violating US sanctions by selling telecom equipment to Iran. She was taken into custody last week in Vancouver while changing planes. China's state media called the arrest a targeted attack against China's leading technology companies, and Canada's role as a participating wrecker is becoming more and more obvious. According to court documents, Ms. Meng has long-standing ties to Vancouver dating back at least 15 years, as well as significant property holdings in the city. Her family also sought leave to remain in Vancouver if she was granted bail, with her husband saying he plans to bring the couple's daughter to Vancouver to attend school during the trial.
James Ransley reporting, and the bail hearing for Meng Wanzhou will continue tomorrow in Vancouver. The Warriors coach Stephen Kearney has tried to diffuse the war of words between former star Shaun Johnson and the Auckland NRL club. Johnson, who's now with the Sydney-based Cronulla Sharks, spoke out at the weekend about his time at the club, saying Kearney, who has been coach for the past 2 years, simply didn't like him. But Kearney refused to bite back when he spoke publicly for the first time since Johnson left the club 2 weeks ago. Sports editor Stephen Hewson reports.
After getting an early release from the final year of his contract with the Warriors, it's not surprising Shaun Johnson's departure from the club where he spent 8 years hasn't gone smoothly. When he wasn't offered a contract beyond 2019, Johnson, who was reportedly on $1 million a year, felt aggrieved. The Warriors' chief executive Cameron George had a not-so-subtle dig at Johnson over his inconsistent play, saying the club needs consistent performances and individuals, and not everyone's been doing that. Since arriving at Cronulla, Johnson has said that Warriors coach Stephen Kearney simply didn't like him, and he was left out of the side's leadership group and discussions around the club's playing roster. But Kearney denies there was a personality clash.
I can honestly say, after spending close to 20 test matches working with him, and certainly in close quarters over the last 2 years, I've got a pretty open door. The first time I heard about that was following, a request for a release, so it came of news to me. It's unfortunate, but I've got no problem with Shaun.
Shaun Johnson's immediate absence hasn't had much impact on the Warriors squad. The Warriors captain Roger Tuivasa-Sheck says his Kiwis teammate wasn't usually one of the earlier players to join the squad for pre-season training.
It's funny you should mention because he doesn't really start till after Christmas, so yeah, it's pretty normal at the moment. So, once that all finished up with the news of Shaun going, I think the boys were quick to move on from that and just ready to dive into what's next for us.
Even though Johnson wasn't part of the senior leadership group, Tuivasa-Sheck says that doesn't mean he was on the outer with the players.
Shaun was well respected in our club. The boys really looked up to him. He was here for a long time. He did an 8-year service here, so we all looked up to him and had a lot of respect for him. And it came down to, like anything in business, to take on an opportunity, and he did that, and now we're looking forward to what's next for us.
And Stephen Kearney's adamant the club won't be rushed into finding a replacement for Johnson.
The next recruitment decision that we make, they're really important ones, and we're not going to be panicked into making any rash decisions. We've got a couple of young guys here that, when you get presented with a challenge, what that does, it offers others an opportunity.
Just how much of an impact Shaun Johnson's departure will have won't truly be known until next season kicks off, and that's not until mid-March when the Warriors host the Canterbury Bulldogs in their season opener. For Checkpoint, Stephen Hewson.
Well, if you love a good mystery, this next story is for you. It is a mystery that has left the residents of Mowat Street in Waitara scratching their heads. What has been leaving their cars in buildings covered in spots and splatters of pale yellow and difficult to remove substances? Well, we sent our reporter Robin Martin to the North Taranaki township to investigate.
That's the sound of Rex Brunning washing his car. And not for the first time today.
So it's Rex, isn't it?
Yeah.
What are you up to there, Rex?
Oh, I washed this spotless about an hour and a half ago, and then now it's all that droppings all over again, so I'm sort of just wiping it off.
So how often do you find you have to wash the cars?
Well, every day. Well, I'm not washing it every day, but to get it off every day, there's that much on there.
Mr Brunning says the yellow spots have been a problem on and off for years, but were particularly bad at the moment. He says the oily and waxy material can be difficult to remove.
It's been on there a day or two. Shit, it's hard to get off. You've got to sort of wash it with water and then come over with detergent, some detergent, car wash I've got to get it off.
Next door neighbour Kim Marshall is also fed up.
Yeah, every day you go out, if you wash your car, it's back there the next day. So it's kind of like yellowy little spots on your car, and it's quite hard to get off, like sticky sort of. And I don't know whether you can see it, but it happens on the shed as well. So yeah, it's just constant every single day.
Ms Marshall says the spots have everyone baffled.
Yeah, a bit of a mystery, really. Yeah, be good to get to the bottom of it though, because yeah, poor old Rex, like he cleans his car more than us, but yeah, it's like just every day it's a nightmare having to go out and clean stuff.
Mowat Street is on the flight path to New Plymouth Airport, and Rex Brunning's wife Kay says they've been told the splatters might be something to do with dumped aviation fuel.
We had our windows double glazed, and the guy that did the windows, I sort of apologised for the mess on the outside of the windows, and he said to me, don't worry about it, it's jet fuel. And I just sort of thought, oh, that'll be what it is, but it's just got worse and worse.
Rex washed the family's cars early this morning to put that theory to the test.
The plane sort of went, there was a few there, so I rubbed it all off again, waiting for the next plane, but in the meantime there was more blimmin' droppings come, so it sort of cancels the plane out.
Air New Zealand concurs with Mr Brunning. It says the turboprop aircraft that operate from New Plymouth Airport do not have the ability to jettison fuel during flight. And in a similar case in Nelson last year, the Civil Aviation Authority put the blame on waterfowl. But if it's bird poop, Tina Nicholson, who lives directly across the road from the Brunnings, is getting off lightly.
Do you get the same problem with these yellow spots?
No, not that we've noticed, no. I think it must go straight over our house and hit them.
So is this a bit of a mystery, the neighbours talking about it?
Yeah, it is. It's very strange. It looks like pollen to me.
Pollen, you say? Now that rings true to a tip given to Kay Brunning from a woman in Tauranga.
She said to me that the yellow-orange substance that we're having the problem with is bee droppings. It's honey-based, so that sort of makes sense to us because at the bottom of some of the droppings it's kind of a yellowy colour, and so I don't know what it is.
Ricky Leahy is a board member at Apiculture New Zealand. He reckons that tip is right on the money.
Can often happen at certain times of year if there's like a place where there's beehives nearby. When they fly out, like they cleanse themselves. So, in other words, they have a little poo when they're flying out, you know, and you get little spots like that, and it's particularly annoying for people when they just put their washing out.
Mystery solved. Now all that needs to be done is to locate the offending hives. I Taranaki mo te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Robin Martin-Aho.
I'm fascinated by that story, and if you didn't catch the pictures, that story will be up on our website and our Facebook page, so do check it out, because really, do bees poop that much, and is it sort of synchronised pooping? Because if you look at the pictures, there's a large volume. Not convinced. If you've got any more details, get back to us. Checkpoint at radionz.co.nz. I still want more information on that one. Hundreds have turned out for the opening of a community centre in Martinborough today that has brought together the whakapapa and the heritage of the small Wairarapa town. It's been a 6-year fight to save the Heritage Town Hall and build the adjoining community hub that together make the new Te Wāhinga Centre. The day was extra special for the local hapu, Ngāti Hika Wera, as they were welcomed back onto their whenua after a century of displacement. Miriana Johnson was there for the celebration.
A welcome home for the people of Ngāti Hika Wera, who once inhabited this town they called Waihinga. The hapu came from across the country to give their blessing for the name Te Waihinga, meaning cascading waters, to be used. Ngāti Hika Wera rangatira, Tiki Rangimari e Mahupuku McGregor, says the hapu agreed to the name after some last-minute consultation with the local council.
One of some of the conditions was that as a council they recognise Ngāti Hika Wera back on their whenua. We are a family that have been sleeping for a long time, but just through this building we've been reawakened.
A po that is standing at the local museum will be put in the centre, along with other taonga that will be brought to the centre in February. The $5.3 million project includes a refurbishment of the 106-year-old town hall and a community hub alongside that, which includes a library, cafe, plunket and meeting rooms. Project manager Victoria Reid says it was a challenge building a contemporary building attached to the Heritage Hall.
We had the old and grand with the town hall. We really wanted this new celebration of our community to be attached to it. So, you know, they've really done that in the style of a sort of a modern lean-to, if you like. And, you know, you can look up at the rafters and think about, you know, the big old rafters and wool sheds around the district.
The project was a joint venture between the South Wairarapa Council and the Waihinga Charitable Trust, which contributed 45% of the total funds. The Trust's chair, Max Stevens, has been at the forefront of the fight to save the town hall. He says the centre has drawn plenty of detractors over the last few years, as locals concerned about rate increases became vocal in their opposition.
It was very upsetting because, you know, we'd done a lot of consultation and we were doing what we were doing we thought was for the community.
Max Stevens says it was a relief to see the centre open and hundreds of locals streaming in.
And the town's flourishing, and having a community hub like this will only help in future years. You know, this is not only for us now, this is for the next 100 years.
Over the 40 years he's lived here, local winemaker Clive Patton has seen many of Martinborough's heritage buildings lost. He says the centre will help rejuvenate this part of the town.
This was a dead part of town, except when there was a concert or something. Now we'll all be here, and we will use it as a hub, I know, because Martinborough has a real collective energy.
Phase 2 of the project is yet to be complete, which includes a new playground and car park. For now, the local hapu are taking centre stage, giving an impromptu performance that showcased the stunning acoustics of the town hall. For Checkpoint, ko Miriana Johnson tēnei.
And just enough time to get to some of your feedback before the news. Returning to an earlier story about the Child Poverty Monitor report, 1 in 5 kids not getting access to good, healthy food, and the City Mission also giving out food parcels. This person says too late now, but maybe the City Mission should be giving out birth control, not Christmas parcels. No one should have 8 kids, let alone someone who cannot afford to look after them. Cheap, effective family planning is the answer.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batten aho. The Transport Agency's chief executive has resigned after months of pressure. Fergus Gammy says he's stepping down because he doesn't want to be a distraction as the agency toughens its enforcement of vehicle testing. Phil Pennington reports.
Mr Gammy has faced months of mounting pressure over the agency's failure to enforce road safety regulations. The board today accepted his resignation to take effect at the end of the month. The board chair, Michael Stiasny, earlier described the regulatory wing as being in intensive care. Critics say Mr Gammy cared much more about building roads to the exclusion of keeping them safe. But Mr Gammy says he's proud of the work he's overseen since taking the job in early 2016. He says the reopening of State Highway 1 after the Kaikoura earthquake was a highlight, along with the setting up of a new Safety and Environment Directorate. This is Phil Pennington.
Some international media have identified the man accused of the murder of 22-year-old British backpacker Grace Millane. Ms Millane's body was discovered on Sunday afternoon in an area of bush just 10 metres off the road in Auckland's Waitakere Ranges. Sarah Robson has more.
Ms Millane arrived in New Zealand at the end of November on her OE after visiting South America. A 26-year-old man charged with her murder appeared in the Auckland District Court this morning. He made and lost a bid for interim name suppression, but his identity remains a secret while his lawyer appeals against the decision. However, some media outlets have identified the accused online, including a photograph, before taking the articles down. The police are reminding people that it is an offence to breach name suppression, and that includes naming someone on social media. Ko Sarah Robson, aho.
The Prime Minister says she can only make a very limited comment about what's happening with the head of KiwiBuild, who RNZ understands is away from work due to an employment dispute. Mystery has surrounded Stephen Barclay's absence since early November. The Housing Ministry has issued a statement saying Mr Barclay has not resigned but won't make any further comment. The Housing Minister, Phil Twyford, also refuses to answer questions, saying it would be inappropriate to comment on an individual public servant. Jacinda Ardern says it's an operational issue.
What I can say, because I have seen some of the speculation that has been in media reporting, is that the Chief Executive, Andrew Crisps, advises me that this has nothing to do with the KiwiBuild policy or the implementation of the KiwiBuild program.
Jacinda Ardern speaking at her post-cabinet news briefing. The Auditor-General has again called out schools for spending tens of thousands of dollars of government funding on overseas travel. John Ryan says some schools do not understand their financial responsibilities and some are not budgeting properly for building maintenance. Dozens of schools also illegally borrowed money last year. Some made loans to staff and others paid teachers extra. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
The report says 44 schools had such serious financial problems in 2017 they would not be considered going concerns without the Education Ministry's support. It names 3 schools that spent government funding on overseas travel, including for the second year in a row Blockhouse Bay Intermediate, which spent $23,000 on a trip to South Korea for 21 children and 3 teachers. The Education Ministry has told schools they can pay for travel if it has an educational purpose, but should consider if it's the best use of the money. The report says more than 60 schools broke education regulations and laws last year, most of them breaching borrowing limits. Call John Gerritsen TNA.
People whose properties are in the way of a planned highway between Otaki to north of Levin have been told. Letters were delivered to them today saying a preferred corridor has been selected and their property might be directly impacted. The letters have been shared on social media. They say the southern part of the road will run near the existing State Highway 1 and the northern section alongside State Highway 57. Residents were told in February of 9 potential options and expressed their frustration since at how long it's taken for a decision to be made. A southern Queensland council is suing the Australian government for negligence over the management of land contaminated by firefighting foams. The Toowoomba Regional Council has filed the case with the Supreme Court in Brisbane, claiming the Canberra government has been negligent in its management of the issue. Communities in Williamtown in New South Wales, Oakey in Queensland and Katherine in the Northern Territory have been affected by the potentially toxic chemicals from firefighting foam used on nearby Defence Force bases. The substance, known as PFAS, has been used in firefighting foams at 18 Defence Force bases across Australia since 1970, but was removed from use in 2004. The chemicals have remained in the soil and groundwater at some Australian airports and defence bases. A fire at Callaghan Innovation in Lower Hutt is now out. At its height, 9 fire crews battled the blaze, which started in the roof of a building housing the government's Research and Development Agency shortly after 2 o'clock this afternoon. A fire and emergency spokesperson says hazardous substances are being managed by its crews and Callaghan staff. He says the substances pose no risk to the public. It's 5 minutes past 6. Sport, despite playing a leading hand in helping New Zealand to their first away series win over Pakistan in nearly 50 years, off-spinner Will Somerville has been dropped for the last 2 tests against Sri Lanka. The 34-year-old Somerville made his test debut in the third and deciding test against Pakistan in Abu Dhabi last week. He took 7 wickets to help the Black Caps to a 123-run test victory and a 2-1 series win. However, Azaz Patel, who also made his test debut in the Pakistan series, is the only spinner who's been named in the squad for the 2 tests against Sri Lanka, the first starting in Wellington on Saturday. Meanwhile, Australia a short time ago was 275 for 9, needing 323 to beat India in the first test in Adelaide. The most successful doubles combination in tennis history are returning to the ASB Classic in Auckland. The 40-year-old American identical twins Mike and Bob Bryan have won 114 ATP doubles titles in 20 years on the tour. They've won 16 Grand Slam titles together and also Olympic gold in London in 2012. The New Zealand driver Richie Stanaway and Tickford Racing have parted ways after a disappointing Australian supercars season. Stanaway finished 25th in his first full season in the championship, and a team statement says the pair have mutually agreed to cancel the final year of his contract with the former Ford factory team. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Peter Lamp assesses the latest sports news from his Manawatu bungalow. We have a window on the world of an Irish medical scandal, and I speak to the brains behind the latest edition of Shit Towns of New Zealand, the perfect travel book if you're planning a staycation this summer, although I understand the author has been receiving death threats, so he's probably staycationing as well. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, cloudy periods, isolated showers tomorrow. Waikato to Manawatu, including Bay of Plenty, the Central High Country and Gisborne to Hawke's Bay. Today, mostly fine with isolated showers. Tomorrow, cloudy periods with showers, some heavy with possible thunderstorms from afternoon. Horowhenua to Wellington and Wairarapa, cloudy periods and isolated showers, mainly about the ranges. For Marlborough and Nelson, mostly fine about the coast, cloudy periods and a few showers inland, some heavy with possible thunderstorms during the afternoons. Bulletu Fiordland, cloud increasing and occasional rain developing this evening. Canterbury and coastal Otago, mostly cloudy, scattered light rain or drizzle. Southland and the remainder of Otago, cloudy periods and isolated showers. Showers becoming widespread for a time tomorrow afternoon and evening. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy with a few showers, clearing this afternoon, fine breaks increasing tomorrow. It's coming up to 6:09 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina, and I'm Lisa Owen. The man charged with murdering British backpacker Grace Millane has appeared in court for the first time. Ms Millane's body was discovered on Sunday afternoon in an area of bush just 10 metres off the road in Auckland's Waitakere Ranges. Annika Smith was in the Auckland District Court for the murder accused's appearance today.
He entered the dock in a blue paper boiler suit and appeared relatively calm in the dock. He did glance at the public gallery a few times but appeared to have no known supporters sitting in there. And
did he say anything during the appearance?
He didn't say anything. He didn't speak to his lawyer either. At one point he did say something to a security guard who left and went out the back to the cells, but they returned and nothing came of that.
So was Grace Millane's family there, and how full was the public gallery?
The public gallery was very full. There would have been over a dozen journalists from both local and international media, obviously a case of high public interest, and the public gallery was full to the back of the courtroom with people.
What about her family? Do we know if they were there?
They couldn't be seen in the public gallery, but it's possible that they were watching the proceedings via an AVL link from somewhere else. The Judge Evangelos Thomas, actually acknowledged their presence. He said he didn't quite know what to say at that point in time, and he hoped that justice for Grace would be fair, swift and bring them peace, but also reminded them that there was a procedure to follow.
You've sat through a lot of court cases. Is that unusual in your experience?
It is unusual to get the judge expressing such a heartfelt, almost acknowledgement of their grief at the start of a case. And he also he said this before the defendant was actually placed in the dock, so before the hearing started.
What actually happened in this appearance? Because it went on for about an hour, so what was actually going on?
There were lengthy discussions about a couple of matters, procedural matters that arose. His defence lawyer Ian Brookie opposed a number of media applications, and that was on the grounds of fair trial rights. That sort of intertwined with his opposition to also naming the defendant.
So this was applications for us to take pictures of the accused?
To take photos and to film the defendant. Those applications were opposed, and there was also a separate application for interim name suppression, so those two things can intertwine at times. He argued for against those things on the basis of fair trial rights, protecting his client's right to a fair trial, that potential jurors may not be prejudiced towards him, and he made particular mention of the blue boiler suit that he appeared in, saying that people, it would be the New Zealand public's first glimpse at this woman's accused murderer, and that they may draw assumptions just from his appearance, which was out of his control. It's commonplace for them to be wearing those suits.
So what did Judge Thomas decide? In the media's favour, or?
In the media's favour on both counts. He granted the media applications, and after lengthy discussions he declined to grant interim name suppression. He said the principles of open justice outweighed the Defence Counsel's submissions, but the defence lawyer, Mr Brookie, immediately indicated he would be appealing that decision, which means that there's an automatic 20 working day suppression prohibiting media from identifying him until that appeal's heard.
So that's interesting, because you also mentioned that there were international press in court today. How have they been reporting this appearance?
So they were a little different. There were a couple of outlets that identified the accused online. One actually published a photograph of him, but since then, this afternoon, the articles have actually been taken down.
Interesting. This is a first appearance, as you mentioned, and running parallel to the legal process. Obviously, the police are continuing on with their investigation. What do we know about what they're doing?
So as late as this morning, they were still out there at the scene, Scenic Drive in the Waitakere Ranges. And the investigation, they've said, is going to take a very long time. So Grace's body was removed last night and a post-mortem examination's been completed today. The investigation is ongoing, and so we'll be keeping you updated as soon as we hear.
Yeah, because they were still asking for appearances of the sightings of the car, weren't they?
A red Toyota Corolla 2016. It was a rental car, and they're appealing for sightings, I believe, Monday morning in West Auckland, and that was the car that actually ended up at Taupō.
And that's Annika Smith, our court reporter, who was at the Auckland District Court today for the first appearance of the man accused of killing Grace Millane. A psychiatrist says the system is failing when it comes to the mental health of children in state care. Oranga Tamariki doesn't even collate figures of how many kids in its care experience mental illness, and there is no specific mental health support for them. The ministry is now being called incompetent, and it's being accused of trying to hide key statistics because of what they would reveal. Reporter Indira Stewart and videographer Tim Collins has been investigating.
This is my foster home where a lot of my suicide attempts happen. This is the carport where I tried to commit suicide, and obviously I'm still standing today. Yeah.
At age 12, Naila Wisa arrived at the South Auckland foster home carrying her only belongings, a jumper and a pair of trousers stuffed inside a supermarket plastic bag. She'd lived in more than 30 different foster homes in the preceding 3 years.
My upbringing was that my birth mother was raped at a young age, and of course there wasn't much help out there for her. And with Pacific families, you know, it's quite hard to deal with someone that's pregnant at a young age. So they didn't know how to deal with it, and instead they've shamed her. So of course she probably felt the same way, so I got the harsh part of it. So every day with my birth mother, she will say stuff like, I should have killed you before you were born, or I wish that you were never born because my life is miserable.
She says she was strangled with a jug cord, held underwater in the bath, and sexually abused while living with her family. Eventually, SIFS removed Naila from her family's care, but the constant shifting between foster homes that followed only added to her trauma.
There was a time where I was here, but they had to move me again because they had stuffed up again. When we moved in, it was only meant to be me, this lady, and the girl. But that night, it was her son was there, and he was much older than us, and his room was right next door to us. And I woke up and the girl that was with me, she had taken off. And I thought, oh, okay. And so then he comes into our room and he raped me. And then I took off. And I came back here.
Naila's SIFS records detail how fragile she was during her time in foster care. Social workers repeatedly describe her as distressed and anxious and say they're concerned she's suicidal. But she says she barely received any mental health support.
I also had friends who committed suicide through care. And you look at it because you feel like that's your only option. When everything else around you, you're born into a family that didn't want you. You have friends who you're trying to please to love you, and then being moved around by so many homes, you think, man, there's nothing else. What else is there? So it's better not to have life? What's the point of having life when everything else you do is never good enough? Everything else you say is never right. Wherever you go, you're never wanted. So what's the point? I mean, that's the kind of mindset you have.
The Otara foster home where Naylor made multiple suicide attempts lies in Counties Manukau, a district with high levels of mental distress. Last year it had more kids in state care than any other district in New Zealand. Psychiatrist Dr. Siale Foliaki has worked on the front line of mental health services in Counties Manukau for more than 20 years.
The fact that more and more kids are ending up in foster care and state care is a reflection of a society that's under duress. The most complex children that I see are the kids that are in foster care. They have the most complex set of needs because they have the least stable environment to return to. And if you think about what causes us distress, when we don't feel secure, and where do we get our security from? We get our security from strong attachment, strong relationships with primary caregivers in our family. And so if you remove a child from that, often when that family is not the best, clearly, otherwise they wouldn't have been removed. But it leaves them more vulnerable than other children.
He says being separated from your family, even an abusive one, is traumatic.
The challenge for a child is, though, their sense of identity and who they are is always wrapped up in their family. And so the child is always wanting to reintegrate or re-establish contact with their parents and have a relationship with their parents. And often it means that they go through an incredibly difficult time emotionally. And so a lot of kids go from placement to placement to placement because they're so distressed and, a particular caregiver can't manage them. But each placement breakdown is another trauma that the kid has to go through. So I see kids in state care, they just get trauma upon trauma, and it leaves them really emotionally incredibly fragile.
Paora Crawford Moyle has been a social worker for nearly 3 decades and is an advocate for people who've been in state care. Her memories of the 14 years she spent in care with her 2 younger brothers are still vivid.
The last thing my dad ever said to me when he left us was, Paora, make sure that you look after the boys. And I took that to mean that was my job. That's what I had to do. And I was 5 years old. That was my job. That's what I had to do. So when I couldn't do that, my mental health, my well-being, suffered terribly, because it's almost like I could handle the harm happening to myself, but when my baby brothers were being harmed, and they're behind a door that I can't get to because I'm too little to open the handle, and I can hear them crying, that is something that stays with you for a lifetime. You asked me about my mental health. I know that I suffered, that they suffered.
The government's mental health inquiry report released last week said many submissions highlighted how childhood trauma was the origin of mental distress and addiction.
So many questions flooding a little brain. What's happening? Why is this happening? I must have done something to make mummy and daddy unhappy. Why are these people coming to take us? What did we do wrong? See, when you're little, children often think that the world revolves around them and that there's something that they've done to cause the bad things to happen. But I believed my dad when he said to me, keep your bags packed, I'll come back and get you. I held on to that promise for very many years. I always had my bag packed in case my papa came back to get us.
The Mental Health Inquiry report also noted that state agencies such as Oranga Tamariki could exacerbate trauma. But despite this, the inquiry offered no specific recommendations for how to support children in care.
It takes a lot of trauma and sometimes intergenerational trauma to cause children to give up. So for me, the option of leaving the world was always prevalent. We don't have a lot of understanding in social work about how trauma, intergenerational trauma particularly, impacts children. We know a lot of our children in state care have experienced suicidal ideation or whakamomori, the varying stages of deep depression.
We asked Oranga Tamariki how many children had attempted suicide while in its care and how many had reported mental health issues over a certain period. The ministry refused to supply figures because of the work that would be involved. It said it couldn't provide the information because it had never collated the data.
The fact that they've never had kept records of that information, does that concern you at all?
Yeah, absolutely concerns me. And I know that Oranga Tamariki has come into existence and their principal philosophical position now, compared to the old child, youth and family services, is to absolutely place the child in the centre of care. And if you place the child in the centre of care, that sort of information should be known. Yeah, I think it's a failing of the system to not be able to identify and not to have that type of record so that we could analyse whether or not what we do now is better than what we've done before and think about a baseline towards the future. If we change the way, if we think we can do it better, then you should see a reduction in those types of statistics going forward. But how can you make those comparisons if you don't have that information?
You don't know where you're starting from.
You don't know where you're starting from.
The ministry's response came as no surprise to Paora Crawford Moyle.
But it's always been a poor system of collating really key facts and figures and statistical information that would help inform us of what we're getting right and where some things are going wrong. I actually think that a lot of key information isn't collated, and that's what you've found, because it reveals too much. And it would be too hard for the Oranga Tamariki, child, youth and family, whatever name you put on it, for the system to actually explain.
What kind of a picture do you think that would paint if those statistics were collated?
I think we need to get brave and actually put the real figures onto the table and have a good look at this. This is about our children.
Oranga Tamariki says it refers children in care with mental health issues to the appropriate services in the community. But Ms Moyle says that's just rhetoric.
Is the ministry doing enough to support the mental health of children in their care?
I think that there are generic services that children are referred to, but I hear children saying to me, actually it goes right over my head, nobody's listening to me. We hear lots of lovely rhetoric that children's voices are the most important, that we're listening to them, we're being informed about how we do things differently, how we do things better. I'm telling you, there are a lot of children that are not being heard, and there's still those stories and experiences that we're choosing to ignore, that we're choosing to cover up, and they're not coming out into the light of day. It's not okay to listen to all the lovely stuff and not really take responsibility for some of the shit practice that is actually happening at a frontline level.
We called many different helplines and services to try to find specialised help for children in care.
Hello, Lifeline.
Hello, this is Chatoko. Hello, this is Youthline. You're speaking.
Good afternoon, Youth Horizons.
Hello, this is Kidsline.
Not one of the services we called was able to direct us to where a child in foster care could go to for mental health support.
Oh, I'm not sure about that.
No, we don't. We don't sort of provide that sort of thing. I think that
Oranga Tamariki says while it doesn't collate information on the number of suicide attempts or mental health issues reported by children in its care, it does record that information on each individual file under behavioural attributes. Paora says even the language points to the ministry's incompetency.
Here's what I think. I don't think that the mental health and well-being of children inside child protection or Oranga Tamariki are being catered for. I don't think that we have the expertise. We have a lot of incompetence.
If there's anything that you could say to the government in terms of demanding change in this ministry, what would it be?
Stop protecting your own ass. Stop protecting what you didn't get right, get brave and actually have a look at what we're doing to children in care.
Mo te hōtaka o te ahipone ko Indira Stewart aho.
Oranga Tamariki told Checkpoint it understands the young people it works with often have a complex mix of issues and that it is vigilant and responsive to potential suicide risk. The ministry says it believes information on suicide attempts and mental health issues is best held on each individual's personal file. And that story was made possible by the NZ On Air Innovation Fund, the Mental Health Foundation and Like Minds Like Mine. You can read an investigation into New Zealand's Pacifica mental health crisis on RNZ's website, rnz.co.nz. Just enough time for a bit of your feedback before we go on our earlier story about this guy who filmed himself forcibly blowing cannabis fumes into a little kitten's face, saying he was getting it stoned for the second time. This person says, Lisa, there is serious evidence out there of a link between harming animals and domestic violence. And Mike says, low conscious cruel behaviour should be dealt with seriously. And an animal rights group did refer that to the police. It's been referred on to the SPCA. And on the subject of bee poo, or what is suspected to be bee poo, this is in Waitara, which is a kind of powdery substance that is coating people's cars there. And the suggestion is it's bee droppings. Paul, who is a beekeeper, texted us to say, yep, most likely bee droppings. I questioned the volume of this. And someone has said, M says, pretty sure it's bee poo. Google it. They release within vicinity of their hives. And Karen says, pasty yellow colour and it's waxy, very hard to get off cars. It's bee poo, Karen says. But Karen also says, I still like bees. Thank you so much for all your feedback. That is all we've got time for this evening. Thank you so much for your company.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Transport Agency's Chief Executive Fergus Gammy has resigned amid intense scrutiny over the agency's failure to enforce road safety rules and vehicle testing. The police are warning that naming the man accused of murdering the British backpacker Grace Millane is an offence. The Prime Minister says she's been assured the absence from work of KiwiBuild's head, Stephen Barclay, has nothing to do with the KiwiBuild policy or its implementation. And India has won the first cricket test against Australia in Adelaide by 31 runs. Our next news and weather is at 7. This is trending now. Sally Magnuson is a Scottish journalist, broadcaster and author. In 2012, she published a memoir called Where Memories Go, about her mother's dementia. Sally Magnuson also set up a charity called Playlist for Life, encouraging access to personally meaningful music for people with dementia. Now